are these people?
Getting back to the article, that the ADL threatened the UAW with an anti-BDS lawsuit. Wait, what? Yes, well, the ADL is hysterical and crazy. Jonathan Greenblatt, we know all about the ADL and how much influence they actually have over corporate media, right? And
I've
over
got whole segments on it.
Yes, they literally accuse everyone of what is it? Being antiseptic, right?
Racism and antisepticism and,
so
all that jazz.
In early July, Ryan Grimm, autopilot, left The Intercept and launched a new nonprofit site called Drop Site News with famed Intercept founder Jeremy Scahill. Thank you, Otto. I'm now doing the show with autopilot, if everyone didn't know that's on the podcast. The site's first viral article was entitled, and they launched this thing, quote, "The UAW's Federal Monitor twice pressured the union to back off its call for a Gaza ceasefire, then launched an investigation." That's such crap. Grimm thinks he's got a big scoop, wrote, "Borowski's pursuit of Fain has less to do with concerns over union self-dealing and has more to do with the politics of Israel-Palestine." Maybe he was covering for his editor's husband? I don't know. Stop trying to hide Reef, Otto. Come on. Grimm wrote, "Borowski's pursuit of Fain has less to do, like he said, with concerns over union self-dealing and more to do with the politics of Israel-Palestine." Bullshit. Bullshit, Ryan Grimm. I call bullshit. As his evidence, Autopilot presented a potential legal threat issued by Jonathan Greenblatt and the hysterical Zionist ADL against the UAW's Local 7092 at NYU and the New School. Remember, we covered that. UAW activists at the schools had been calling for BDS against Israel for the ongoing campaign of genocide that Israel has pursued in Gaza. Mike Elk is also Jewish, by the way. Thank goodness. For the Jews like us that stand up and stand against what's going on there. As he says, New York State's first in the nation anti-BDS law requires state and local governments to divest from any group engaged in BDS calls. That's insane. I think Texas did that too, and same with Georgia. But I think it got overturned in Georgia. I remember that Abby Martin famously fought it and took it to federal court in Georgia and won. With the UAW representing public and graduate employees at public universities, the state could be forced to divest from the UAW's pension and retirement funds, or possibly even not provide dues checkoff for the union. New York state law has allowed the state to strip unions of dues checkoff if they violate state law. It'd be a little difficult to collect money. Having been sent a serious legal threat, Borowski informed UAW President Shawn Fain of the threat in December and forwarded the letter from the ADL to the IEB, that's the International Executive Board. Quote, "Although this issue is outside of the monitor's jurisdiction, we thought it was important to forward the message to the IEB given the serious concerns raised here." He's not telling them they have to do this. He's saying that they should act. He's not telling them what to do. He's saying now, he did say what his opinion was, but he asserts that it's his opinion. He says, "For what it's worth, as I previously shared with Shawn, similar concerns were raised directly to me shortly after the IEB issued its own ceasefire statement." But it doesn't necessarily say that he has a problem with it. In an IEB meeting attended by top UAW officials, Borowski again brought up the legal letter from the ADL. Later, one of the UAW's attorneys objected to Borowski informing the UAW of the threat from the ADL. Wait, what? Why?
Yep.
Again, we're going to talk about who that was, while the 58-year-old veteran labor lawyer Nathaniel Carney, it's kind of funny, a felon convicted of conspiracy for obstruction of justice within the Teamsters in the 90s,
Okay.
he's played a key role in the legal department. Okay. While he has played one, it was the much younger 36-year-old Jewish attorney, Benjamin Dichter, who sent a letter to Borowski. So basically, he's also a Zionist who got triggered. All right? That's what's going on here. You've got a Jewish attorney that's part of the UAW that doesn't like what's going on. This is okay. He says, we ask that such respect be mutual and that your office be respectful of the guardrails of your role and refrain from any further communications of the sort discussed in this email. He's just trying to stonewall the guy.
Yep.
After Dichter's email, all right, Borowski never mentioned the letter that he received from the ADL, so it worked. All right, but here's my favorite part, and the reason why I brought this tonight. We all know Ryan Grimm very well. We all know that Ryan Grimm has tried to play both sides of the fence when it comes to quote unquote being a lefty or a progressive. He calls himself one while he fillets billionaires and works for multiple of them simultaneously. I want to mention that he's already said that, and they announced at The Intercept that they would be funding and supporting Ryan Grimm and Jeremy Scahill in their new effort called Drop Site News. So basically, they're rebranding the Intercept on Substack and called it Drop Site News. And ooh, it's a whole new big thing. No, it's all the same people, just brought over there and not paid directly by Pierre Omidyar, but rather, who knows how they're getting paid now. But they're still going to keep doing it. And by the way, they're still getting fed scoops. Who the hell leaves a big publications like that and gets more scoops than they had when they were there? Otto? Oh, right. You?
What?
You do? Autopilot does?
Yeah.
How about
I think
that?
so.
Okay, Ryan. All right. So, Crying Grimm. No, not Crying Grimm.
Is autopilot part of the pilots union? Who were the ones that tried to do the Teamsters?
Yes, that was the
UAW.
Well, that was the Alliance or Allegiant Airlines pilots. They tried to be Teamsters and they weren't being represented, so they joined the pilots union. We covered that a couple weeks ago.
That's what it was.
My buddy Dennis Yu. Pay Dennis Yu, Teamsters. Pay Dennis Yu. All right, enough Ryan Grimm, please. Ryan Grimm doesn't disclose that his editor is married to the communications director, as we said, and it gets a little testy. He gets a little upset. On February 29th, which is actually the day that I interviewed the Amazon employees, the fired Amazon employees that were purged off the board. All right, Michelle Valentin-Nieves and Ronald Boone, shout out to all of them, Nicole Druda and Chermo. I had a great conversation with them. If you haven't seen that, please go back and watch that. That's great talk with them. So that day, the Detroit Free Press broke the news that UAW Secretary-Treasurer Margaret Mock had been demoted from most of her assignments as labor leader in the UAW. That same day, Borowski sent a letter to the UAW asking for information about the demotion. She's the second-ranking officer, and as we know, she's African-American, and there have been problems with the person that's alongside Shawn Fain being accused of insensitive to black issues when there is a large contingent of black members. According to Autopilot, Ryan Grimm, Borowski's investigation of Mock's demotion came as direct retaliation for the union's support of a ceasefire in Gaza. Forget about the fact that there actually is a culture of fear and there was a culture of corruption, and they need to be investigated, and that's his job. His article said that on February 29th, just 6 days after, Borowski sent a sweeping demand for documents saying he was opening an investigation into Fain and a dispute Fain had with the Secretary-Treasurer. All right. However, labor law experts, including anti-Zionist ones like the University of St. Louis's Mike Duff, say that Borowski, as a lawyer, may have had merit in forwarding a potential legal threat from the ADL to the UAW. All of them said, I think forwarding a letter from the ADL out of concern that the union risked violating the anti-BDS law, leaving questions of constitutionality to one side, arguably fell within the monitor's legal ethical duty. Because if they weren't going to get funded by the New York State, don't say duty. I knew you were going to do that. You're a child. But because if they don't
yes,
fall,
I am.
If they don't get paid out by the state, if the state revokes their financial ability to raise money and to charge dues because of this thing, he's certainly within his responsibility to let them know. All right? Because, all right, some within the UAW have been pushing for the union to support BDS. However, concerns about legal and financial consequences have led to UAW International Executive Board members voting down BDS resolutions so far. If the UAW in its own international executive debates is worried about the legal and financial consequences of BDS, why would it be strange for their federal monitor to forward a legal threat from a Zionist organization known for suing critics of Zionism? It's crazy. He should. Ryan, I Need a Haircut Grimm wrote in his article that Borowski also asked for any and all emails, text messages, and instant messages sent between Fain, his top deputies, and his lawyers from February 12th through 23rd. That covers pretty much the exact time the UAW and Borowski were jockeying over the ADL's complaint about their call for a ceasefire. Again, nowhere does Grimm mention that Borowski's investigation was launched by a complaint filed by the UAW Secretary-Treasurer. He may not even have known, but he certainly never asked and never reported it. Clearly, union members would want to know why the number 2 elected union official was demoted. Again, University of St. Louis labor law professor and anti-Zionist Mike Duff says it's hard to see Grimm establish that Borowski engaged in punitive measures against the UAW. It's a pretty vague threat. I can't understand what the union was being threatened with, since the monitor could already ask for anything he wanted related to his function. The UAW, of course, did not return multiple requests for comment for this story. No surprise there. Borowski has denied ever expressing his views on Palestine. So the monitor, we don't know if he's a Zionist or not. He's staying quiet. But the evidence against him is merely that he forwarded a letter from the ADL, a controversial group that has sometimes stretched definitions of anti-Semitism to include anti-Zionism. Not sometimes.
Yes.
They literally had it passed in Congress.
Congress. Yep.
Okay. Borowski again told the New York Times, quote, "This false account is offensive and an obvious attempt to distract attention from the most recent report. We have adhered to standard norms of a monitorship in referring complaints to union leadership. It has nothing to do with his religion, their religion, or anybody else's religion, or their stance on massacres and ethnic cleansing and genocide," even though it's gross that there are members of UAW leadership that clearly are for genocide.
Yep.
No evidence exists tying Borowski to Zionist groups or expressing Zionist beliefs beyond him fulfilling his legal duty to forward the lawsuit threat from the ADL. However, Fain's allies on social media have repeatedly pointed to Borowski being praised by the World Jewish Congress. Why? For his work as a federal monitor of Credit Suisse when he investigated the bank's role in hiding Nazi money stolen from the Jews. So that makes him a Zionist? Even progressive activist and author Matt Stoller, who is also Jewish and half a shit lib, I would call him a mid-lib, very good on monopolies, but really bad on a lot of other stuff, says that he detests the ADL and feels that they manipulate anti-Semitism to support Israel's horrific war. And I agree. He says, as someone, Mike Elk says, as someone who was a staffer on Capitol Hill during the bailout, Stoller says that the attack on Borowski is a smokescreen designed to smear him for speaking out against the purges that Fain has initiated within his union. Sean Fain must be protected at all costs for the Democrats. They can't have anybody else as their president, certainly not Will Lehman, that's going to stick his finger in the eye of the Democrats and leadership and the Republicans for that matter. All right? He says, I worked with him during the financial crisis. Yeah, who? I worked with him during the financial crisis, and he showed immense integrity in standing up to the biggest bank in the world, as well as a lot of corrupt people in the Obama administration, Stoller said. Borowski was heavily smeared by the Obama administration and faced threats that his role as special investigator of TARP would be defunded because he called out the big banks. He was very honest under immense pressure, and it would be hard for me, very hard for me, to imagine that he would be doing something unethical here. I've never seen him do that, and I've seen him under some pretty intense pressure. Like, what's his motivation? Afterward, Borowski published a book in 2012 titled Bailout, an Inside Account of How Washington Abandoned Main Street While Rescuing Wall Street, which is a widely read New York Times bestseller. I didn't know that. The book was a gripping account detailing how the Obama administration attempted to retaliate against him for accurately reporting on the bailout as Special Inspector General. So he's got experience with this. He said, quote, I thought that if there was ever going to be, yeah, Obama is right. I thought that if there was ever going to be a political figure that would take on the interests of Wall Street, it was going to be President Obama, and that just didn't happen. Yeah. His cabinet was literally chosen by Citigroup. It was the exact opposite of that. He had the same ideology as Secretary Tim Geithner, and frankly, the same ideology as a lot of those people who came from Wall Street. I wonder why.
Come on, people.
Yeah. Borowski's forwarding of the ADL's threat occurred in February, so why would the UAW wait until they were in trouble for not turning over documents to raise this issue? Weird. Furthermore, if Borowski did engage in political interference, the federal judge has the power to remove him from the case. Given that parties in federal monitorship often record meetings, why would Borowski risk losing his federal monitorship by bringing this issue up? It literally makes no sense. It makes no sense. Currently, it's the word of Neil Borowski, who would face severe legal penalties if he was lying, versus just one anonymous source who spoke to a reporter whose editor was married to the communications director at UAW. The UAW's own legal team has a checkered past, which would lead one to doubt their credibility. We learned about Nathaniel Charney, who was one of their top lawyers, who was responsible for helping to steer their legal strategy, again, was convicted of conspiracy to engage in obstruction of justice by another federal monitor of the Teamsters in 1998. Literally, what's happening here, he got convicted of 25 years ago. How he's allowed to do this again at the UAW, I have no idea. But Charney cooperated with federal authorities in their investigation and was able to keep his law license after an 18-month license suspension as punishment. So he took a little slap on the wrist, was able to continue practicing, and now 25 years later, he's doing it again. The younger Jewish lawyer, Benjamin Dichter, who wrote a letter complaining about Borowski's forwarding of the legal threat from the ADL, I don't know why, again, what's the problem with him forwarding a letter, is also in Borowski's crosshairs, which he should be. Borowski has asked the federal judge for Dichter's and others UAW lawyers' emails and correspondence, which Dichter, of course, has resisted.
Hey, phrasing!
No, that's his last name, but he's resisted because of attorney-client privilege, of course. All right? Why? Well, after taking over as counsel of the New York News Guild, Dichter faced criticism from New York Times reporters for not presenting a yearly budget of legal expenses. And we know why. Because an analysis by Payday report of Federal Department of Labor financial records in July 2021 showed that legal costs doubled in the first year after he took over as union counsel. I wonder who he paid. Maybe his own firm? In 2020 alone, the union spent over $620,000 on outside legal costs instead of hiring a much cheaper in-house counsel nearly doubling the $335,000 spent by the New York News Guild in 2019. Even pro-union labor law experts say that kind of union spending on outside legal counsel was excessive for a union local of only 4,200 members. $600,000 for only 4,200 members? So, here's my favorite part. Payday Report asks Ryan Grim, why didn't you reveal that your top editor was married to Jonah Furman? I don't think you understand how conflicts of interest work, said Grim, and that it was widely known in the journalism industry. How would a rank-and-file UAW member reading Grim's article know this unless the conflict of interest was disclosed directly within the article, a fact that may have influenced his reporting? Grim claimed that his publication's founding editor, Renner, a founding editor, wasn't directly involved in the granular work of editing the final article. However, as the publication's founding editor, she still allowed it to be published on her site without revealing her husband was the UAW communications director. Grim repeatedly refused to answer questions about whether or not he worked directly with Jonah Furman, her husband. Over a period of 3 weeks, I attempted to engage Grim and set up an interview with him to discuss this. He refused to answer most of my questions. Still, he did threaten to sue me if I got any facts wrong about how the founding editor of his publication was married to the UAW's communications director. He says, quote, "Do not defame my editor. We'll take it seriously. If your story is fair and accurate, great, but you're on notice." What a piece of shit. And he's got that in text. That's in writing. Every journalist's background and family connections shape the way they report, and it's important that they disclose this information. He says, for 17 years as a labor reporter, I've always disclosed that my father, Gene Elk, is the retired director of the organization of the United Electrical Workers. As a Jewish union leader, he worked to pass the first BDS resolution passed by any union in the country back in 2015. Even when writing for the New York Times about how corruption in previous UAW administrations sunk a union drive at VW in Chattanooga in 2014, I revealed that my mother had been a UAW activist when she worked at VW in Western PA in the 1980s. For 11 years, I traveled back and forth to cover 3 major UAW attempts at their plant in Chattanooga because, as the son of an auto worker, I know how important it was for rank-and-file auto workers to have accurate coverage. Following the historic union victory, the UAW has had an opportunity to organize non-union plants. Still, since the victory at Chattanooga, the UAW has stumbled, losing a narrow union election at Mercedes in Alabama. With the news of the purges and fear of intimidation within the UAW, one can't help but wonder if the infighting within the UAW is hurting their ability to take advantage of a historic moment to organize in the South. Because as, again, Federal Monitor Neil Borofsky repeatedly warned, a culture of retaliation within the UAW could hurt the union's ability to achieve its goals. And again, he says, if left unchecked, these issues will inevitably impede the union's efforts to create a culture of compliance. No matter how strong its architecture of policies and procedures, the union cannot detect and prevent malfeasance, financial or otherwise, if such a sizable portion of its employees fear speaking up when they see it. Divisions within the union are also having a negative impact on union morale and, if left unaddressed, could further drag down the union's pace of reform. And again, the full 124-page report can be found linked from Payday Report. PaydayReport.com. Support Mike Elk. Support independent media. Support journalism that holds labor union bosses accountable. It's so important because they're running around acting like they're representing the people and the workers, and we know damn well that they're not. Let me also go here. Support independent media, like I said, because who else is telling you this story? Where else are they talking about this? unless it's somewhere in a Republican district where they're trying to stick it to Sean Fain. We support independent media. We are totally user-funded. We really appreciate the people that hang out in chat. They are the people that make this network and this channel what it is. And without you guys, we don't really exist. I mean, we would do this even if it was just us. We started out just us, but man, we need all that support that you can give us. So we really appreciate that. We got that QR code up there. We talked about this last week, but we're gonna have the Zago brothers create some cartoon art. They've gotten already about 15 Indie Media Award honorees. They had done on this poster called Truth Tellers. Hey, how about that? IndieMediaAwards.substack.com. You can see the whole list. But those are the best of the best in independent media, from live streamers to journalists to outlets and video creators. We have a list with all of their links and ways to find and support them. And we're going to do something special this year. We teamed up with Zago Brothers to create cartoon illustrations of each Indie Media Award honoree, and even some people to represent some of the outlets. We were trying to figure out what to do. And that's going to be a lot of fun. And so that's what the QR code and the Ko-fi is going to go towards, is supporting that with Zago and paying him for his time and for his work.